I thank you for taking the time to listen to this week's episode of Overall HR, and I'm super excited for our conversation today. I have a friend, we're now like on a nickname basis. He doesn't have one yet for me, but I have Michael Franco. We connected on LinkedIn. I was really impressed by his content and saw that we were in a similar profession, serving similar people, and thought, hey, I think we could have a fruitful conversation about this outsourced fractional HR world. So I will, rather than introduce Franco, also known as more formally Michael Franco, I'll have him introduce himself and tell us a little bit his professional journey.
Thank you so much for having me, Chase. My name is Michael Franco. I started Quokka Hub, which we help companies elevate their people strategy, right? So through all the things that we're used to, performance management, disc assessments, such like that. But the idea is really to align people strategy with business goals. I'm also the fractional head of people for Don't Be a Little Pitch, which is a PR agency that's going through a growth phase right now. So I'm offering them strategic HR leadership.
Okay, I love that. Now, how long have you been in the fractional HR capacity?
I want to say about 6 years. I was kind of forced into it, to be honest.
Well, tell us about that. Then I'm curious. How does an HR person? HR people don't get forced into too much. Nope, not many people want to be around HR, much less force them into something.
Very true. I ended up moving to Australia, and just because of visa situations, the way their visa systems work there, you can only work for a company from 6 to 8 months, depending. But I found a loophole is if I start my own business, companies can contract me for as long as they wanted. So I spent 3 years there and 2 years in New Zealand. And it basically was my company, even though it was me working for these companies. So that's how they were able to use me for longer periods of time. Again, mostly startups, but it was a good way to get HR leadership that wasn't even from your country.
Yeah, no, I love that. So for our listeners, because we do, of course, have HR practitioners and professionals that listen to the podcast, but we also have like business owners who may not be familiar with fractional HR. So how would you define fractional HR services?
Fractional HR is being able to grab strategic leadership at a cost-effective way. In a cost-effective way, I should say.
Yep. So your other business, so your business that you do, tell me again the name of your company.
Quokka Hub.
Okay, I'm really curious. What's the why behind that?
Well, again, I started in Australia, and quokka is an animal specific to Australia. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're the most friendly, happy animals that come together anytime you're around, and they're almost like a group. And I thought, well, that's exactly how teams should be, happy and working together to get a goal. Their goal is always food, but for businesses, hopefully it's, production and profits and such. But when you get the team together, it's they're all happy doing it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, what's the secret recipe? Like from your perspective, without sharing too much, is I assume it's not like a one size fits all approach, but what makes teams happy?
I think companies really need to look at the entire employee experience, which a lot of people miss out on, because throughout that, I guess the three big things is people want to they want communication, right? They want to know what they're supposed to be doing, when they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be doing it. They want to have performance. They want to know how their performance is doing. And then they want opportunities to grow once they've hit those goals. I think those are the three easiest things that anybody can put into their business and start noticing a difference.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. And it seems like it's lost.
Lately, yeah.
Why do you feel like that is, Franco?
I'm unsure. I think a lot of HR leadership is looking at AI and all the new technical breakouts and such, and they're focused on this as a replacement rather than something that can actually elevate your HR professional. So they don't do the tasks of having to go, where's our benefit guide? And you're like, it's over there, same place I showed you last week, rather than strategically going, hey, you know what? Let's do individual development plans for everybody, because now we have the capacity to do so. And we lost that by looking at like, well, can we trim down our HR departments? And since this can do all this admin stuff, we don't really need anybody anywhere else. So now your strategic people are completely stressed out trying to do multiple projects. And when you do multiple things at once, you're successful at none of them.
You're absolutely right. And I it's interesting to me, and you hear this a lot, and I'm sure that you've received this feedback, especially starting your own business and also working in other businesses. People say frequently, like, be sure you're not spending so much time in the business that you're not working on the business. Well, the really like hypocritical or paradoxical, whatever adjective you want to use to label that, is the fact that HR is overlooked in terms of the strategic value add that it provides a business. But the essence of HR is working on your highest, most important asset, and that is your people.
Yeah. The one thing that can move the needle in your business is what we're supposed to help with.
Yes, exactly. And the very same people that will be like, we need to be working more on the business, don't give attention to those thought partners or strategic fire starters, for lack of better terms, which is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I love that. I want to kind of like pivot back though in terms of like the fractional model. Do you think that in today's day and time that the HR fractional model could work for any business?
I think it's highly adaptable, but it's not necessarily for every organization, right? When an organization gets large enough, they need a dedicated professional to be there strategically planning everything. Now, maybe they run into a certain issue and there's a fractional HR person who specifically focuses on maybe HR technology or performance management or something. Then yes, I think you can bring a fractional person on for a project to implement a new change that the leader in place wanted to do, but just is based on their capacity, right? Or
Right,
maybe even
right.
expertise.
Absolutely. When do you feel like you, let me ask this, and this might be putting you on the spot. You said there that the fractional model, like once a business meets a certain size, that it's necessary for them to have their own on-site dedicated in-house person. What size, like what would be if I ask, okay, when do I need an in-house HR 9 to 5 presence? What would your response be?
What I've seen in my personal experience, when I go to my clients and say it's no longer cost effective for me to have to be doing these things just because of how much I cost, about 10 to 20 people. That's when you start getting those very basic questions and, fighting with PEOs about very basic things, where if you just put somebody in-house, the foundation's already laid out because you had a fractional person there, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
very little change that you're going to need to do. Everything's there. Now you can just place somebody who's also an HR professional, an expert, but maybe not to the level that you had with your fractional. And that
Mm-hmm.
person is now cost effective to deal with the small problems and still strategically think for future as you continue to scale.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I think a common misconception, and I find myself saying it too, is that small businesses don't need HR. And a lot of times, like small businesses, you get into this frame of mind, is it under 15? Because 15 is when things really start to change. Talk to me about that. Like, do you think that this idea is bogus that employers must reach a certain size to need HR?
To your point exactly, it's bogus. I think HR needs to be started right. Like HR strategy or people operation strategy, however you want to call it, needs to be started from the very beginning, right? You're building a culture, you're building a company, and these people are going to be intertwined and working towards a common goal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it should be directly from the start. And if you are an HR professional starting a company, you got a leg up, but you're still going to need help with all those other aspects because you're focusing on building your brand, you're focusing on your marketing, your budget, and all these other
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
things. And I do believe actually with technology nowadays, we're just going to see smaller companies. So those communication touch points are so much more important because you only have two people doing. Maybe you have one person in marketing and one person in sales, and they drive $2 million in revenue, just the two of them. Well, what if they don't get along? What if their communication's off? What if one is performing different than the other? How do managers deal with these kind of things? There's all these unique HR processes that to us sound very basic because we've seen it, but to anybody in business, it may be completely new to them. And we're fortunate enough to
Mm-hmm.
have seen a lot of different ways, a lot of different different
Oh,
people
yeah.
things that have happened.
Hmm. Well, and you bring up a good point. It's like when you're talking about the fractional model and even consultants, like the value add too is that they have seen like multiple variations of a process that maybe you don't even realize that you need.
Yeah.
They're not in the weeds with you. They have that bird's eye view. So I appreciate that. Um, you've referenced PEO a few times. Do you care to share with our listeners, like, I guess, what PEO, what it is, but also what need does that satisfy for businesses?
PEOs are wonderful for smaller companies because they mitigate some of the compliance risks, right? They process payroll. They're admins. They're
Mm-hmm.
really good at admins. Now they still make mistakes as admins because they don't take 100% of the what do you call it, the risk. You're sharing
Yeah,
that with them. So if you have a bad PEO,
absolutely.
they could be doing incorrect compliance on many different things. But it is useful. I will say. I think they're. I'm not saying PEOs are not bad. I think they're wonderful, but there's no strategy in it, right? They're great at admin. They're great at compliance. There is zero strategy with the PEO.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think PEO stands for Professional Employer Organization.
Yeah, I
I could
think
have got
so.
that way wrong, something like that, um,
Too many acronyms
but
nowadays.
I know, like PO, pain in everyone's, I don't know, an O. But you're right. And something, I don't know if you get this in dialogue, like whenever you are explaining what it is that you do, and we're at different phases. How long have you had your business, Franco?
I want to say about 6 years.
Okay. So you're kind of at that point where you have an identity, you probably have like a not well, you do have an audience because I found you, I was part of that audience, but also you have just a network of people that are familiar with what you've done, and it's more results based referrals as opposed to discussing expectation based referrals. And there is a
Mhm.
difference. You're always going to have expectation based referral, but whenever you can have that results based, that helps your credibility. So for me right now, a lot of my selling points is trying to get someone to understand from the transactional aspect. And I love how this Riverside FM, it just picks up on all of my hand gestures. Um, but I get feedback where it's like, oh, so you're like a PEO. And it's like, no, I'm
No.
not like a PEO.
I can do what a PEO does, but I don't want to. You shouldn't pay me for
Exactly.
that.
Right, right. And that's sort of the tension right now where I'm at personally. And so, carrying this narrative a little bit further, I'm curious, Franco, like in your experience, what is the difference in an HR function, whether it be in-house or outsourced, being treated as a responder or reactor to things rather than a partner actually in the operations of the business?
This is my biggest frustration ever. Um, we HR almost, I think everybody will agree, we're treated as responders. Something comes up, they call us, it's already well happened, the building's on fire, and now we have to put it out. And there's no way we can plan strategically. There's no, we're putting out a fire. We're not benefiting, we're not planning ahead for anything. When we're actually a partner, we can then plan ahead for all different aspects of every different leadership style and such. If a leadership came and partnered and said, hey, I'm thinking about these kind of things. Now we can partner and plan it out and give that leader a whole bunch of different ideas on where they can take this, instead of being like, hey, everybody stop showing up for work and I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
The responsiveness that people treat HR is unfortunately typical, and it just underutilizes HR. And it's unfortunate. I think everybody thinks that we're there to respond to issues and protect the company and this and that, when really, if you use us as a partner, we're there to drive business. We're one of the biggest aspects
Absolutely.
to make profits go up, because we make your people aligned with your goals and they're happy. They're happy doing
Mm-hmm.
so.
Well, and that's the thing too. And I'm going to move my mic because I just realized I'm not even plugged into my mic. I think it's through the iMac, which is fine. Um, You know, I wondered. I'm curious to hear your opinion on this because there's really like I'm sure there is some sort of studies in fact, but I think that HR professionals have not helped themselves because there are some bad HR people out there,
Yes.
and they're not seen as helpful. They are seen as barriers. They are seen as like one way thinking, and that's my pet peeve. I used to tell people, whenever I was with Marriott, I was HR director. HR, my title was HR manager, but I was on the executive team, and was a department of one. But they used me as thought partner, and the general manager there did a phenomenal job of making sure that I was part of the conversation. But sometimes we would have conflict whenever I didn't approve of the direction, but I had to accept it. And living in the tension can be hard for people in HR in particular because it's not our decision a lot of times.
No, most times it's not. Especially the larger organizations, we have very little.
Exactly. So, like, that's one of the things too. It's just, I think that it's two part is that HR can't be scapegoat. They do not bear the consequences of a decision. So sometimes I think that a decision maker may be like, well, it's not their decision anyway, so what's the value? But a good HR professional is an influencer. They're able to see, educate, and become that thought partner. But the other angle to that too is that HR professionals will come in sort of with that authoritative, like, you have to do this. And in reality, you don't. Like, you know, a business owner can do anything.
Yeah.
And I have had clients, and I'm sure you have too, and they didn't work out where they just say, we're going to do it anyways. And if we get sued, we'll cut the check.
Yep.
And that's hard sometimes whenever you're in that tension and accepting the fact that you have to sit down and you have to essentially convince, you're selling.
Yeah. Because they don't see the immediate benefits, unfortunately. And that the partner
and sometimes
part
it's
really,
not.
yeah, and yeah, sometimes the benefit. Most benefits. I always say this when I put in like OKRs or performance management. They're like, "Oh, this will fix all our problems." I'm like, "In 2 quarters, it will. It's not going
Right.
to fix it immediately. You have to get people used to a system. They have to learn how to do it, and then now they can look at their goals and go, "Okay, I have the autonomy to figure out how to hit my goals." That doesn't happen overnight. Nothing with people happens overnight. And I guess that's a frustrating part of HR is that like a lot of the benefits we see, we may not even be there when our strategies are implemented, and we might leave, or you're fractional, you're definitely leaving. So you only get to check up a year later and be like, everything good? They're like, yeah, it's blowing, it's doing wonderful now. And they're like, great, I didn't get to see any of it.
Right. But you're spot on. And it's like, right now I have someone that is working with me, and I know there's a level of frustration that comes there, but sometimes I can be pretty intentional about not giving all of the instructions up front because I want to invite them into being a critical thinker. And selfishly, if I tell them how to do it, maybe they have a better way of doing it.
Yeah. Or a different idea that you can mend the two, which can even be better.
Right. So it's just, and it's also encouraging people. I tell her, and I mean this, you have a safe space to fail. Like, the only thing that we're not messing with is, I'm sorry, I said that backwards. The only thing you cannot fix is death. Like, we can't fix that, but we're not messing with vitals. So we can fix it. We can fix it. And I think that's also part of it as well, but I could get down a whole other rabbit trail about performance and people and the human experience. But let me ask this of you, in terms of the impact of HR, where do you feel like HR, and you've answered this a little bit, but where do you feel like HR can play the biggest role in a business?
I think you touched on this too. It's people, right? Your most valuable asset in your company. We are the people to help you with that. And it's a partner. I really can't stress it enough. Like, everybody who's HR should be an HR business partner. We're not just human resources. We're not just people operations. We're business partner. Because we're creating strategies and partnering to create strategies that influence your number one asset to hit the goals that your business wants to hit. So I am blown away when people, and this kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier of like people, you have to talk to people of like, well, why don't I do PEO? Why don't I do this? It's most people don't know to ask for help with their people strategies, because nobody really knows it is wrong until they start seeing retention issues. That's the only time that we get like a, oh, hey, we
Oh
need to
yeah.
help, rather than we proactively would see this coming down the pipeline through anything from just having open communication, fostering good one-on-ones with managers, to even pulse checks, quarterly pulse checks, where we can be like, all right, we've seen a 25% drop in this. We need to address this before it turns into an issue.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting you say that. Some of the I used to say too. It's like my job is to try and make subjective decisions as objective as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And a good HR thought partner can help to coach that behavior in managers.
Yeah.
And I don't think I finished my thought earlier in terms of like I got kind of sidetracked in comparing the two HRs. But when you think of the role of HR, it's to support what the company wants to do as long as they don't get sued. Like that's it. And sometimes supporting what the company wants to do is, and you've touched on this, Franco, is knowing where they want to go, understanding where they are currently, and supporting them in their venture in trying to get there. And it's just it's really is a satisfying position, but it's lagging behind other functional areas of businesses just because of the current state of it and people's the impact of the function on people, because it just there's a negative stereotype.
Very negative. But then again, I don't see a lot of our processes, or what we're even speaking about, being implemented.
No, I agree. It's truly is. It's getting the buy-in. But what I will say as we wrap up our conversation is it's people like you that are continuing to keep HR at the forefront and to keeping it part of the conversation, and your willingness to speak with me today, connect with me today, because I think that in time we'll see a change, but it's just one conversation like this one at a time. So
I agree. We'll see it change. And I think we have a huge opportunity, especially with the tech I was saying, if we really learn to leverage this and really focus on the people strategy to drive those business results, and we are looked at as partners, and we treat the business as a partner as well in what we do every day.
absolutely.
I think it's going to blow up. You'll see a whole different type of HR that we're used to, or what our parents were used to and such. It's a huge opportunity right now.
I agree. I agree. Well, Franco, I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you today, speak with you today. I'm so jealous that you are in Cancun right now. I'm here in central Kentucky where the temperature is dropping, fluctuating, and my sinuses are like killing me. But this has been good, and I hope to be able to stay connected with you.
Appreciate you so much. Thank you for having me on, Chase.
Yeah, thank you.